So get this. Back during the Civil War, the Star Arms Company put together a .44 caliber cap and ball revolver. They thought it was going to be something special. You could use it in double action, which meant one pull of the trigger would cock and fire the gun all at once. Soldiers really liked that idea at first, but the trouble was how hard the trigger pulled. It took so much force that most shooters could hardly keep the gun steady. That heavy pull threw off their aim every single time. Dirt and the gunk from black powder made things even worse. The tricky parts inside would jam up and quit working right when you needed the gun most. Those inner pieces needed really careful cleaning, but that was tough to do out on the trail. Once the frontier really opened up, the experienced gunmen switched to simpler designs from Colt and Remington. The Star just got shoved in the back of cabinets and forgotten by the people who needed a sidearm they could actually count on. Only a few examples are left in collections today. They mostly remind folks that coming up with a new idea first doesn't mean much if you don't build it right. Then there was the Chicago Protector Palm Pistol from the 1890s. The Chicago Firearms Company made this odd little disc-shaped gun that fit right in the palm of your hand. It measured barely 3 inches across and had no trigger at all. You fired it by squeezing your whole fist around the grip. A round magazine inside held 7 rounds of .32 extra short ammunition. The big problem was that cartridge had almost no power. The bullet moved so slow it could hardly break skin from any real distance. It wouldn't even stop a determined attacker if they were just an arm's length away. The squeeze firing made aiming almost impossible because every shot shifted the whole gun around. Black powder residue built up fast and jammed the whole thing. If you needed a concealed weapon, a small revolver worked way better in every single way. The palm pistol looked futuristic, but it failed at everything practical. Museums have a few surviving examples now. People see them as curiosities from a time of weird gun experiments that never went anywhere. Another one was the Reed My Friend knuckle duster that James Reed patented in the 1860s. It was a brass knuckle grip with a tiny revolver cylinder attached that had 5 or 7 chambers. There was no barrel on it at all, just the chambers pointing forward. It fired .22 rimfire cartridges with such small powder charges that the shots barely made any noise. The .22 had very little stopping power, and without a barrel, accuracy disappeared completely because there was no rifling to spin the bullet and keep it flying straight. You had to be close enough to punch someone for this gun to have any real effect. Loading took forever because you had to fill each tiny chamber one by one. The whole thing felt awkward and weighed down your hand in a weird way. Gamblers and saloon regulars sometimes carried them as a last resort backup, but serious gunfighters wanted nothing to do with it. The My Friend earned its nickname because you really had to be right next to your target, like friends, to have any chance of hitting them. Some inventors just wouldn't keep things simple. In the late 1800s, Belgian gunmakers created the Guyot pistol. It used a chain of linked chambers instead of a regular rotating cylinder. Some versions claim to hold up to 40 shots. That sounds impressive until you actually tried to use one. The chain mechanism jammed constantly because each link had to line up perfectly with the barrel and the firing pin. Getting all those chambers to work together was almost impossible in real-world conditions. Reloading the chain took way too much time and needed patience that no gunfight even allows. The ignition system failed regularly because the chain added too many moving parts. It was one of the most complicated handgun designs ever attempted, and that kind of complexity kills reliability in the field. Very few were made, and even fewer survived because owners had no reason to keep them. It remains one of the strangest failures in firearms history. A French inventor patented the Jara harmonica pistol in the 1860s. Instead of a cylinder that rotated, it used a flat block of 10 chambers that slid sideways to line up with the barrel. The block looked like a harmonica, which is how it got its name. This thing had problems from the very start. Dust and dirt caused the sliding mechanism to stick, especially in the dry conditions of the American West. The pinfire cartridges it used were fragile and unreliable, with exposed firing pins that could go off by accident. Reloading the chamber block took too long in any kind of fight. The weight distribution made aiming feel strange and awkward because most of the mass sat off to one side of the grip. By the time you got off a few shots, someone with a simple Colt revolver had already ended the fight. The harmonica pistol never caught on in America, and the few that made it to the frontier quickly proved useless for any serious work. Samuel Colt's first production revolver came out in 1836. It was the Colt Patterson. The Texas Rangers used it against Comanches and praised how it could fire 5 shots without reloading. That gave them a real advantage in running fights on horseback. Here's what they complained about, though. Early models had no loading lever attached. You had to completely take the gun apart to reload it. In a fight, that delay could get you killed. The design was delicate and built more for gentlemen than for rough frontier conditions. Parts broke under hard use. Capping the nipples for each chamber took careful attention that you rarely had in combat. Chain fires remained a constant risk, and where sparks set off multiple chambers at once and sent bullets flying in directions you never intended. Colt listened to the feedback and improved his later designs with the Walker and Dragoon, but the Patterson itself faded quickly. By the real heyday of the Wild West, these guns were antiques that collectors treasured while working cowboys ignored them completely. The Allen and Thurber pepperbox revolver was popular in the 1840s and 1850s. These guns had multiple barrels, usually 4 to 6, that rotated around a central axis. Most came in 31 or 36 caliber cap and ball. Gold Rush miners bought them because they were cheap and offered multiple shots in a compact package. But the problems piled up fast. That cluster of barrels made the front end heavy and hard to aim steadily. Most models had no real sights because the hammer blocked your view when you tried to line up a shot. Many lacked rifling, which meant the bullets flew wherever they wanted instead of where you pointed. Chain fires happened when sparks from one chamber ignited others, turning your pistol into an uncontrolled spray of shots. Mark Twain himself made fun of the pepperbox in his writings, noting its complete inability to hit anything you aimed at. By the time proper revolvers became common, the pepperbox was a joke among serious shooters. Belgian gunmaker Louis Dollin created the Apache revolver in the 1870s. It combined a 6-shot pinfire revolver with brass knuckles and a fold-out knife blade. French street criminals called Apaches made it famous in European back alleys. The gun had no barrel at all, just the cylinder chambers pointing forward. The 7mm pinfire cartridges it fired had almost no power and even less range. Without a barrel, accuracy beyond a few feet was impossible because the bullets had nothing to guide them. To fire the gun, you had to fold the brass knuckle grip out of the W or risk shooting your own hand by accident. It had no sights and no safety mechanism. Reloading meant swapping the entire cylinder, which took far too long. Everything about this weapon screamed desperation rather than effectiveness. A few made it to America during the late frontier period, but any cowboy who saw one probably laughed at the owner. This was a street criminal's last resort. It was completely useless for real frontier work against armed opponents or dangerous animals. Samuel Colt thought his revolver cylinder would work great on a rifle. The Colt Model 1855 revolving rifle used a rotating cylinder holding 5 or 6 rounds in calibers like .56, with barrels stretching over 2 feet long. On paper, it offered rapid fire that lever actions could not match at the time. In reality, it was a danger to the shooter. The open gap between the cylinder and barrel let hot gas, sparks, and lead fragments escape sideways right where the shooter's left hand gripped the forestock. Burns and injuries were common, and experienced soldiers learned to hold the gun differently or wrap their hands in cloth. Even worse was chain fire. A spark from one chamber could ignite all the others at once, sending multiple bullets flying uncontrollably. The gun could shatter in your hands from the pressure. Black powder fouling made misfires constant. Some Union troops used these during the Civil War and quickly learned to fear their own weapon more than the enemy. Cowboys wanted nothing to do with a gun that might blow up or burn their hands off. The revolving rifle concept died here, buried by its own dangerous flaws. And the Volcanic repeating pistol was the one that almost killed Winchester before it even got started. In the mid-1850s, the Volcanic Repeating Arms Company, with investors like Oliver Winchester, built a lever-action pistol with a tubular magazine under the barrel. Horace Smith and Daniel Wesson refined the design based on earlier work by Walter Hunt. It fired something called rocket ball ammunition, a caseless round with PCC munitions, outer inside a hollow bullet base, and a primer cap in the rear. The idea was revolutionary for its time. The execution was a disaster. The rocket ball had almost no power. The .41 caliber version produced muzzle velocities around 260 feet per second, barely enough to bother small game, let alone stop a human threat. Gas leaked from the breech constantly, sometimes burning the shooter's face with every pull of the trigger. Moisture ruined the ammunition because the exposed powder had no metal case for protection. The cartridges jammed if they did not fit perfectly in the magazine. Dust and dirt destroyed the delicate mechanism within days on the trail. The company went bankrupt multiple times trying to make it work. Oliver Winchester eventually took over and switched to metallic cartridges, creating the legendary Winchester rifles that actually conquered the West. The Volcanic itself saw almost no use on the frontier because it simply did not work. It represented great thinking and terrible results. Surviving examples sit in museums now, reminders that innovation without reliability means nothing when your life is on the line. 26 sounds fast.